What a chaotic way to open a video, and it's also the chaotic way that Chibi Robo opens its menu screen, baby, and I love it. Chibi Robo, for those of you who don't know, is a game where he plays this tiny little robot named Chibi Robo whose sole job is to make his owners happy. His owners, of course, being the Sandersons family, who's struggling with financial problems, but the Sandersons aren't the only ones you interact with throughout this game, because when nobody's looking, all the toys in the household come to life. So this game is kind of like Toy Story in a sense, but it's Nintendo's strange version. Chibi Robo himself is a cute little robot who doesn't talk very much other than using yes and no signs, which is why he has his manager Telly do most of the talking for him, and Telly do be talking. He just blabs on and on and on, but at least his voice is entertaining though. I love the unique gameplay aspect this game has where you run on battery life, so every so often you gotta pick up your plug and plug yourself in to recharge, but as the game goes on and on you get more and more battery life, so it doesn't become like obnoxious at any point. One of my favorite things about this game is all the sound effects when you do anything and everything, like for example his walking, which will change based on which surface you're walking on. His recharge sound. The sound it makes when he climbs up ropes and cords, and the sound it makes when he climbs down ropes and cords. The sound it makes when he uses his Chibi vision. The sound it makes when he cleans up stains with a brush. The sound it makes when he picks up items. The sound it makes when he descends with his Chibi copter. This game just has a lot of great sounds. Now what exactly do you do in Chibi Robo, you might be asking yourself, viewer who's never played Chibi Robo before? Well, I'll tell you. You run around day and night, cleaning up stains, picking up trash, just making the house spotless and beautiful, earning happy points from the family and various other characters in the game, completing their little storylines, and just generally making folks happy, earning happy points until you get enough happy points to become the #1 Chibi Robo, earning yourself the Super Chibi Robo costume. But before I start diving into all the wacky fun storylines and shenanigans in this game, I think I should probably introduce each one of the characters briefly. Starting off, we have the Sanderson family. We have Mr. Sanderson over here, who's a childlike adult who spends too much money on toys considering the fact that he has no job. Mrs. Sanderson is noticeably resentful of him because of all these toy purchases, and she's just generally unhappy. Then we have Jenny, who thinks she's been cursed by a wizard, turning her into a frog, so she only speaks in ribbons. Then we have Tao, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but he's the family dog, alright, arf arf. Then we have Telly, our manager, as previously mentioned, so if you have any complaints, you can go straight to him, and then straight to hell. What the fuck, you don't like this game? Moving on to all the toys, starting off with the living room toys, we have Sophie, who's a dog toy who loves writing in her diary about how much she loves Drake Redcrest. Drake Redcrest being another toy that we can find in the living room that's kind of like a Buzz Lightyear-like character. He's pretty much a hero character that loves patrolling the living room at night and just doing his famous explosive pose, as well as just looking fucking stupid underneath his helmet. Look. Somebody had to say it. MF looks stupid. Moving on to the foyer, we have the Free Rangers, who are an army of Eggmen who attack you on sight trying to defend the foyer. But if you manage to get past them, you can move your way on down into the basement to meet Giga Robo, who's dead, ? Basically, he's an older and bigger version of Chibi Robo. As we admire his corpse, if you can call it that, we meet Captain Plankbeard, who's probably the only character that can out-talk Telly, as he gives you all the lore about Giga Robo. Also, he's a pirate, in case you couldn't see with your eyes. Then we have the Great Pico, who's a fortune teller-like character who loves to gamble, if you can call what he does gambling. Basically, he has you guess if his eye will open or remain shut. Plankbeard over here is not a fan. He claims he cheats. Moving on to the upstairs part of the house, into the parents' bedroom, we have Dina, who's a Lego dinosaur who's in love with Funky Phil, but Funky Phil is a dancing flower that doesn't even really acknowledge her much. He barely even talks to her or looks at her. Then as we move into Jenny's bedroom, we meet Princess Pitts, who's your standard princess character. Then we have Mort, who's a mummy character that's in love with Princess Pitts, but thinks that she won't like him because he's too much of a monster. At least, that's what he thinks. Then we have Sunshine, who has a personality disorder where half the time he's sweet and the other half of the time he's a raging monster, but the fun part is his personality flips on a dime. So that's most of the characters, but there's a couple other characters, but I'll bring those characters up when they come. Hey, yo, when they what? Oh yeah, also not really characters, but there are enemies in this game called Spidors, and they're pretty much robotic spiders that just hate Chibi robos, but that's okay, we'll just blast them and use their scrap to make the house a little bit more Chibi robo friendly with utility bots. Utility bots like the Chibi ladder and the Chibi bridge and the Chibi teleporter that all have eyes like Chibi robo and make adorable noises. Yeah, like your mom last night. On that note, all around the house are these doors with eyeballs on them called Chibi doors that are just weird, strange, and odd when you enter them, and I love it. But anyway, let's start making folks happy, starting off with the Sanderson family because they bought us, duh. Why don't you try showing a little bit of compassion, will ya? I like how initially, to progress the storyline of the Sanderson family, you have to cause issues. Like, for example, Mrs. Sanderson is balancing their checkbook, and things aren't adding up, so she asks you to look for a hidden toy receipt because she knows it exists, and it does, because I found it. Giving her this toy receipt causes her to lock herself in her bedroom, hiding from Mr. Sanderson and Jenny as they stand outside the bedroom door, pleading with her to come out and talk to them, but she refuses to talk. Then things get real as she gives you a letter to give to Mr. Sanderson that he reads out loud in front of you, Jenny, and Tayo, that basically just roasts the whole family, and then she says that her only option left now is divorce.
Please would me talk to me?
Pretty surprising that a divorce happens in a Nintendo game, right? I want to take this moment to highlight how Mr. Sanderson is like really dramatic throughout the game, because sure, this moment calls for it, absolutely, but there are several points in the game where he just says something with drama as he stares up into the sky as the screen fades out on his face. But I also love that after this moment, he's like, oh shit, I gotta start cooking and cleaning just to win her back. Like, yeah, dude, maybe you should have done that all along. But then one of my favorite cutscene moments happens right after this, where Mr. Sanderson, Jenny, and Tayo jump into action, sliding down the railing on the stairs, and they just look absolutely ridiculous. Look at these fools. After you trigger this event, Mr. Sanderson starts cooking regularly, and I absolutely love this because you can do a burger cooking minigame with him where you try to make the perfect burger. He also starts watering the plants outside regularly, and if you try to get in front of his hose, he'll be like, watch out, Chibi Robo, it's dangerous business for a robot to be getting wet, so stand back. And I love the drama as he says stand back. So in order to get the family back together, Chibi Robo actually has to start reviving Giga Robo, which sounds really random, but it ties in. Basically, we have to charge up Giga Robo's battery with our own money, but even after that, there's still an issue because his leg is missing, and allegedly this leg is locked in a briefcase that's under Mr. and Mrs. Sanderson's bed in their bedroom. But in order to get that code for the briefcase, we have to meet the aliens? Yeah, that's right, there's aliens in this game, because why the fuck wouldn't there be aliens in this game? And on top of that, they look like Chibi Robos, and I absolutely love it. When we first meet the aliens, we can't hear them, so we have to get a special hearing chip in order to hear what they're saying. Huh? What is this guy saying? But once you get that chip in order to hear them, they ask you to bring them to Friend because they have a promise they need to fulfill, but they don't elaborate who Friend is. Spoiler alert. Friend is Giga Robo, but also, spoiler alert? What the fuck? Why would you click on this video if you were concerned about spoilers? You know what? Come here. But before we bring the aliens in the house, we get stopped by Drake Redcrest because somebody has to stop this alien nonsense. But then Drake has a little ED moment over here, if you will, as he goes to do his pose, and his normal big explosion is a tiny little cute little baby one. You know, it's embarrassing. I guess he's run out of gunpowder, but you know what they say, the cat's away, mice will play. Get these aliens in here. So then we take the aliens down to the basement where they see that Giga Robo's been deactivated, and they begin having a sick crying session with Captain Plankbeard. After this crying session, they leave, and the next time you summon the alien saucer, you see that they become so incredibly sad that they become sick, and you have to physically help them by picking them up and putting them into their little bed things. But then once you put them in all their beds, the ship enters drive mode, and you have to enter this color combination code thing, which the aliens are highly against you doing, but they can't stop me because you're too sick like some little Once you finish this color combination puzzle thing, this little thing appears that you can climb into regardless of if the aliens want you to or not, and they don't, but they can't stop me. But this little thing that you climb into ends up being a time machine to the past that takes you to the parents' bedroom where Jenny's being made. Hey, yo! Just kidding. Could you imagine though? This game would be out of control. But anyway, it takes you to the parents' bedroom where you see a young Mr. Sanderson arm wrestling Giga Robo as Mrs. Sanderson is cheering them on. But as we explore the room, we notice that the briefcase that Giga Robo's leg is in, allegedly, is on the floor and it's open. But this dumbass dog Tayo is laying right in front of the combination, so you have to give him a bone so he moves out of the way. But once he does, we can see that combination and go back into the present and open up that briefcase. So of course the next thing we do is open that briefcase, right? But jumping jellyfish is a bunch of spiders and they steal Giga Robo's leg and start attacking Mrs. Sanderson. But not on Mr. Sanderson's watch, as he breaks down the door, saving Mrs. Sanderson, and he takes the whole family into the living room. After barricading the doors, he reveals that he designed the spiders, but he designed them to be friends with Chibi Robo, but the company decided to program them to be evil, which is why he quit the company. All information that we're learning with Mrs. Sanderson because she thought that he got fired. Anyway, so he then says that he can upgrade Chibi Robo's blaster to fight the bigger spiders, but in order to do that, he's going to need his tools from upstairs, so he needs us to cause a distraction in the foyer. Once he grabs his tools, he begins upgrading the Chibi blaster, and I love how each member of the family gets their own welding mask, specifically how Jenny has a frog mask, and even the dog has a mask. We then go back to the foyer to start blasting, only to get interrupted by screams from the living room. As we return to the living room, everybody's webbed up and hanging from the ceiling. We then get introduced to the Queen Spider, who has Giga Robo's leg. She then uses her magnetic properties to attach a bunch of metals to herself, including the family's refrigerator. Man, that's crazy. So anyway, we start blasting, until she's good and dead, and after this weird, strange, traumatic event, the family harmony is restored. Honestly, I don't really think the spiders were that much of a threat to the family, but something had to pull this dysfunctional family together. Now that we have Giga Robo's leg, we can attach it to his body and put his fully charged battery in, but wait a minute, pump the brakes there, playa, because now we have to put a password in his foot to boot him up. Kelly tells us that passwords are usually birthdays and anniversaries, so we start looking around the house for dates, only to find out that Mr. Sanderson is missing his wedding ring. That to me sounds like our key to finding this password. But where on earth could this ring be? It's in the drain, like the kitchen sink drain, which I love this part of the game because it kind of turns it into a 2D platformer as you navigate through the drain avoiding rats to find the wedding ring. And once we find the wedding ring, it does in fact have a date on it that is the password for Giga Robo, so we boot him up, ladies and gentlemen. And once he boots up, he picks up Chibi Robo and takes him for a ride towards the backyard as he gets a standing ovation from the Sanderson family and all the toys in the house. And once he reaches the backyard, the aliens show up to reveal that Giga Robo saved their saucer from crashing years ago, and in return they gave him 2 wishes. The first wish he wished for was for all the toys in the household to gain souls, and the second wish was for him to get infinite energy so he could save the Sandersons money on their electricity bill. But the aliens only had enough power to grant the first wish, which is why they're back now to grant the second wish, giving Giga Robo infinite energy, and Giga Robo wastes no time as he immediately plugs in Chibi Robo to give him infinite energy as well. But that's the official end of this game, but this game doesn't really necessarily have a hard ending to it. But now, of course, I gotta talk about all the toys, starting off with Sophie, who I didn't really like that much as a kid because she kind of has an annoying voice, and all she really does is just gush over Drake Redcrest. But now, after completing her storyline, I like her a lot more. Basically, she spends most of her time writing in her diary about how much she loves Drake, and you can even trick her by putting on a Drake costume, which will fool her for a short amount of time. Eventually, she starts writing love letters to Drake that she's losing constantly, and you can pick these letters up and Telly will read them to you in dramatic fashion. And you can do one of 2 things with these letters. You can either bring them right back to her or give them directly to Drake. But what I didn't know as a kid is that if you keep bringing her back her letters, eventually something will happen. After you give her 3 of the letters, she asks you to help her give a letter to Drake by any means necessary. Say less, Sophie, as we put on a ghost costume and scare the shit out of her, only for Drake to come to the rescue. When Drake shows up to save the day, she finally gives him the letter, and Drake takes it. doesn't read it, and then just runs off as she falls over and dies from the excitement. Like, her soul physically leaves her body and just floats up into the air, and what I love is that after this happens, you can find her soul just floating next to Drake for the rest of the game. I guess we should probably talk about this Drake guy next. Drake Redcrest again is our Buzz Lightyear-like character, and he's clearly Mr. Sanderson's favorite toy, as Mr. Sanderson has multiple things that are themed after Drake around the house, as well as he references him sometimes, and even sometimes he can be found in the living room playing with him. Drake Redcrest pretty much patrols the living room at night, and you can even join him on these patrols. He'll even get you a costume, which I mentioned the costume earlier, and he'll even teach you how to do his iconic pose. It's really cool that he gives you the costume and shows you how to do the pose, but when he teaches you how to do the pose, it's really annoying because the timing is like so precise. Drake is probably the character that shows up the most in other characters' storylines, but he doesn't really have much of a story of his own. Basically, at one point in the game, he just gets really sad after his embarrassment in front of the aliens, but once you give him a jar of gunpowder, he returns back to normal. Eventually, you can find him in the backyard at night where he asks you to help him perform a super move on the aliens to help fight him off, but this move actually ends up healing the aliens from the sickness they got earlier in the game. Moving on to the Free Rangers, aka the Egg Soldiers. After you make it past the Free Rangers' defenses, they realize that you're a cool dude and they let you join their cause and do some special training with them. I like how all the soldiers are named after cities, like Detroit over here. Shout out Michigan, baby! As you talk to them more and more, you find out that they have a missing soldier named Memphis who's dragged away by the family dog, so they have a lot of fear of this dog, so they begin getting ready to fight the dog. Once you find Memphis's dog tags, the Sarge gives you a Tayo costume so that you can perform Tayo training with the soldiers so they know how to get barked at. Arf, arf. At one point in the Free Ranger storyline, several of the eggs go AWOL. 4 of them end up being recruited as pirates to Captain Plankbeard's crew. One of them goes full greaser, as you can find him next to a hot rod car in the upstairs part of the foyer, and you can even play a game of chicken with him if you have a hot rod car yourself. I love how precise this minigame is, and if you end up falling off the edge, he calls you crazy, but like in a good way, like you're a cool dude. Then there's these 2 other eggs that get real into space as they get their own little spaceship, and you can even do a minigame with them where you race around the foyer and shoot these planet-looking things, but the more you shoot, the more you slow down, so you really have to know when to shoot and when not to shoot. I don't really like this minigame very much. Eventually they confront Tayo to get Memphis back, and there's this whole Avengers-ass moment as all the AWOL eggs return for the fight. The whole fight being the eggs just surrounding Tayo and you blasting his collar with a Chibi blaster, only to realize that Memphis was just stuck underneath his collar the whole time. The Sarge then realizes that Tayo isn't that bad as Tayo just slobbers all over him. Moving on to the basement toys, Captain Plankbeard and the Great Pico, they don't really have strong storylines, but they do have stories. Well, Captain Plankbeard has a story. The Great Pico doesn't really have one. He's just off being a weirdo. When he's not in the basement scamming you with his blinking minigame, he can be found above the stove in the vent or swimming with the fishes in the fishbowl. You know, just scuba diving without equipment, but you can find a snorkel to give to him. Also on this note, I love that you can feed the fish crumbs. Captain Plankbeard's story is pretty much that he lost his ship, but once you find his ship and dig it up and bring it back to him, he has you help him find him a crew. Which you end up finding him the 4 AWOL eggs as previously mentioned, then he gives you a couple treasure maps. His maps aren't even like maps either, they're more like vague locations. The first treasure is just a Tamagotchi that can be found underneath Giga Robo that you can give to Mr. Sanderson. The second treasure can be found in this piano over here by walking on the keys, and I'm not going to attempt to pronounce this guy's name or talk about him any further because he's kinda lame. Then there's the third treasure that can be found in this weird dig spot in the tree in the backyard that reveals this eggplant guy who turns you into an eggplant if you let him. Pretty cool. Then he gives us a gift. You want to take a guess what the gift's gonna be? Did you guess eggplant? Because that's where you'd be wrong, because it's a super eggplant. You're dumb. You're a fool. What's next? Are you gonna tell me you thought Mario and Super Mario were the same guy? Get out of here. No, wait, not you, eggplant guy. Come back. Honestly, this encounter is very random and I love it. Anyway, let's move on to the parents' bedroom toys. No, not those ones. But, oh man, I've been waiting to talk about Funky Phil. Funky Phil's story and Dina's story are very intertwined. We actually meet Dina first as we see her menacing shadow on top of the dresser and a frog laying on the floor with strange bite marks on him. But if you managed to save the dehydrating frog outside earlier, you're gifted the frog suit, which allows you to talk to frogs and, well, Jenny. But hold your butts, alright? We'll touch on that later. So you use the frog suit to talk to the frog, who just yells out his girlfriend's name a couple times, which alerts Dina as she appears on top of the dresser looking very deranged, and then she jumps down off of the dresser, chases you down, and bites you. But since you're made of metal, she breaks her teeth on your head, and a real person personality comes out as she starts flailing around and crying about her teeth. But we're a nice guy, so we give her teeth back and befriend her. She then asks you to help Funky Phil out, who's stuck behind the blinds in the window. So we go to open the blinds, which triggers a cutscene with Funky Phil and Dina, and if you remember from earlier, Dina's in love with Funky Phil, but he barely acknowledges her existence. Man, if Dina was 10 years younger, that boy would be all hers. In Funky Phil's defense though, Dina's very clearly an older woman, just laying it on thick, and maybe he's not interested, alright? So get off his dick. But anyway, the story begins with you saving Funky Phil, who's trapped behind these blinds. Yes, I did in fact already say that, and I'm saying it again. After Dina lays it on him thick and cracks some not so good jokes, Funky Phil begins dancing for you and her, seemingly just to get her to shut up. But after he finishes dancing, he shoots out a seed that you can pick up and water with his funky sweat. But once you do so, 3 little Funky Phils spawn in that you can pick up and bring to Funky Phil, and they immediately start calling him Poppy. But he's like, hey yo, where'd you get these kids from? I ain't your Poppy, which upsets them, and Chibi Robo gives him the good old glare. I love this glare that Chibi Robo does, and this is one of the few moments in the game I can exactly pinpoint him doing it. After he realizes that he messed up, he doesn't admit to being their Poppy still, but he does offer to teach them how to dance. He then asks you to grab the Drake Redcrest CD from the living room so he could teach the little Funky Phils how to dance to it and put on a show for you and Dina with them as little background dancers. After this dance, he drops another seed that we pick up, plant, and water some more with his funky sweat. And again, 3 more little Funky Phils spawn in, but this time one of them looks a little bit different because his face is red instead of yellow, and his name is Freaky Phil because he's a freak. Ah! And yet again, you bring him these 3 new little Funky Phils, and he accepts them with open arms, but he's like, hey yo, where you getting these little dudes? After this, you can find Freaky Phil alone at night dancing by himself while the other little Funky Phils are sleeping because this dude is dedicated. But if you show him the Drake Redcrest pose, he gets really inspired and runs off to Funky Phil to show him what you taught him. But when he goes to show Funky Phil what you taught him, it triggers probably one of the most depressing cutscenes in this entire game. Funky Phil is dead, and no one understands why. Dina's freaking out, understandably so, and Telly encourages you to stay with them as they grieve into the night. Eventually, the little Funky Phils cry themselves to sleep, and Dina is just left defeated. Now, if you will, let's have a moment of silence for Funky Phil. Phil, you were my favorite. You will be missed. So now I guess we can finish up Dina's storyline, which involves you finding Lego pieces for her. Once you find all the Lego pieces, she gives you a piece of paper called block layout and tells you to give it to Papa. Then she proceeds to walk off the dresser and shatter herself into a bunch of blocks. Yo, did she just commit? This game's a little bit darker than I remember as a child. So you give the block layout to Mr. Sanderson, and he begins building Dina into a truck, so that's good, she's not dead. So now that she's in truck form, she uses herself to transport the little Funky Phils to the backyard so they can perform a show in Funky Phil's honor. I love how instead of using her wheels as wheels, she uses them as legs. Both before and after the show, Dina speaks to Funky Phil as if he's listening in the afterlife, and it's a very bittersweet ending to her story. But this isn't the end of their story, because after the show, you can find Dina and the little Funky Phil still grieving next to Funky Phil, and Dina asks Freaky Phil to place some flowers next to Funky Phil, and in doing so, he accidentally hits a switch, and Funky Phil comes back to life? He was just off the whole time, and I'm glad he's still alive, but oh my lord, the drama. And of course, Freaky Phil has to turn him on and off a couple times just for the lulz. But that's the official end of their storyline. Now it's time to move on to Jenny's room for our final toy storyline, featuring 4 different toys: Mort, Princess Pitts, Sunshine, and of course, everybody's favorite, Drake Redcrest. My favorite thing about this storyline is that you can see the whole storyline laid out in front of you as if it's a prophecy underneath Jenny's bed. Underneath her bed is kind of like a tomb where Mort lives, and on the sides of the bed there's hieroglyphics that give you an idea of how to progress the storyline. We start off the storyline by saving Princess Pitts, who's stuck in her castle and also shoeless, so we climb to the top of the castle and we bring her her shoe, and I really like this part of the game because it's like a little platformer section. After we save her, she asks us if we're the one that's always bringing flowers outside her castle, which we're not, but then Drake Redcrest shows up with some flowers to steal the spotlight. But here's the thing though, Drake isn't the one that's always bringing her flowers. That's actually Mort, who can be seen in the background of this interaction looking like a little cuck. But at least Drake admits that he's not the one that's always bringing her flowers because the ones outside her castle are clearly dead. As we talk to Mort more, eventually he asks us to plant him some flowers, and in doing so we learn that whenever he touches flowers they die instantly, which is really sad because he only wants to romance the princess. Eventually she catches him picking flowers, and when she sees his face she screams and faints as he rolls away. Homie's just like, I gotta roll out. She then asks you to help work up her courage, so you scare the shit out of her a couple times with the ghost costume until she gets over it. But then the final event happens as Sunshine goes into a rage and starts attacking the castle. Drake tries to jump in and be a hero, but he gets slapped and knocked out almost immediately. But then Mort asks you to push his button, you know, the big one on his back. And when you do so, a face jumps out of his chest as if it's like a Jack-in-the-Box, which kills Sunshine. Not like literally. It gets him to start dying of laughter, which, you know, works in this case because it at least gets him to stop his rage-filled attack. Then Mort confronts the princess and shows her his heart, quite literally, and they fall in love. Isn't that beautiful? Sunshine himself doesn't really have much of his own storyline going on, but he does ask you for special nectar from a flower that takes 10 years to grow. Bro sounds like he's asking for a lot. You expect me to plant a flower and come back to this game 10 years later, bro? What you actually end up doing is planting a flower in the past using the alien time machine and then coming back to the present to harvest the nectar. It's pretty cool. So that's it for the toy storylines, but there's two more storylines I'd like to talk about. Telly actually has his own storyline, and if you sit on this random stool in the foyer, he'll tell you all about how he has dreams to be a singer, and if you keep sitting on the stool at random points throughout the game, he will begin to start trying to sing for you to practice his act, but every time he goes to begin singing, he gets interrupted by a pan falling on him. It's pretty comical because we never actually get to see him finish a whole song, but eventually he tells us that his career's beginning and that he won an award. On the note of this falling pan, throughout the game randomly, pans will fall on you when you go to recharge yourself. As a kid, I always like to imagine that was a random spy door on the ceiling just like, hey yo, fuck you. But now as an adult, I know, or at least assume, it's this random dude you find in the living room by digging in the carpet named Mr. Prongs just dropping them on you. Mr. Prongs is really odd because he shows up for a second, acting really crazy, then he disappears, and then the pan falls on you, so I'm assuming it's him. Also on the note of Telly, I love that randomly throughout the game, at the end of the day and night cycles, sometimes Telly will be like, oh, Chibi Robo needs some quiet time with Telly. It's awfully quiet in there. What do you think's going on in there? Our last storyline involves bringing these frog rings to Jenny because who else would want these frog rings but the frog girl? If you get the frog suit, you can talk to Jenny and she'll talk back to you like a normal person, where she'll tell you that she's been cursed by an evil wizard turning her into a frog, and the only way to lift the curse is to bring her these frog rings. Oh, right. I really like collecting these frog rings because there's like a ring in almost every single room in the house, and a lot of them are in hard to get places, so it really challenges you to like fully explore the house. I particularly like this one in the upstairs foyer because I struggled really hard as a kid trying to figure out how to get this one. So it's beyond this waterfall fountain thing, and to even get to the fountain in the first place, you have to do quite a bit of platforming, but once you get there, I assumed you climbed to the top, and then there was like a way for you to get behind the waterfall, but the actual solution made me feel real dumb. There's a sunshine sticker on the side of the fountain that you have to shoot off, and then once you do so, it reveals the switch that you just turn the waterfall off with. So once you bring Jenny all the frog rings, she takes off the frog hat and begins acting normal. But the funny thing is, as soon as you leave the room, she immediately puts on the frog hat again, and if you talk to her after that, she says that she's been cursed again, and you can go back and find all the rings for a second time, and a third time, and a fourth time if you really feel like it, because she will just not live without that frog hat. But that's it for Chibi Robo. I love Chibi Robo and all the wacky characters and shenanigans in this game, and I hope Chibi Robo loves me back. And if he doesn't, he's not getting any happy points from me. Guys, thank you so much for watching my video. Please leave me a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this, and if you also love Chibi Robo, I'd love to hear about it down in the comment section down below. Now, if you excuse me, I gotta go spend some quiet time with Telly, but until next time, bye bye.